Katie Morrison pressed her face against the small window as the transport shuttle began its final approach to Nexus Prime. The massive space station filled her view, its gleaming metal surface dotted with docking bays that could swallow Earth's largest cities. Ships from dozens of worlds moved in careful patterns around the station, each one different from the last. Some looked like living creatures with flowing curves, while others appeared to be made of crystal or metal spikes. Her stomach twisted with nerves as the shuttle docked with a gentle bump. 3 months ago, she had been training at Earth's basic military academy in Colorado. Now she was about to become the first human ever to attend the Galactic Combat Institute. The weight of that responsibility felt heavier than the gear bag slung over her shoulder. The airlock hissed open, and Katie stepped into a world she had only seen in videos. The docking bay stretched out before her like an aircraft hangar, but the ceiling rose so high it disappeared into shadows. Beings from across the galaxy moved through the space with purpose. She recognized some species from her briefing materials, but many were completely new to her. A group of tall, blue-skinned aliens with 4 arms each carried equipment that would have required a full human team to lift. Their movements were smooth and efficient, as if the heavy crates weighed nothing at all. Near them, creatures that looked like walking praying mantises clicked and chittered in what Katie assumed was conversation. Their heads swiveled in ways that made her neck hurt just watching. "Katie Morrison?" The voice came from behind her, speaking perfect English with only a slight accent. She turned to see a human man in a crisp military uniform approaching. He was older, maybe 40, with graying hair and kind eyes. The relief of seeing another human face almost made her knees weak. "Captain Brooks," she said, recognizing him from their video calls. "Thank you for meeting me." Brooks smiled and gestured for her to follow him. "Welcome to Nexus Prime. I know this must be overwhelming, but you'll adjust faster than you think. Humans are good at that." They walked through corridors that hummed with activity. Katie tried not to stare as they passed beings that challenged everything she thought she knew about life in the universe. A creature that looked like it was made of living rock nodded politely as they passed. Another being seemed to be part plant, with leaves growing directly from its skin. The station houses over 50,000 beings from 43 different worlds. Brooks explained as they walked. "The Combat Institute only takes the best from each species. You should be proud to be here." Katie nodded, but pride felt mixed with terror. "How many humans are currently enrolled?" "Including you?" 12. Brooks' expression grew serious. "I won't lie to you, Katie. It's been challenging for all of us. We don't have the natural advantages that most species bring to combat training." They stopped at a large viewport that looked out into space. Ships continued their dance around the station, and Katie could see other stations and facilities in the distance. This was the heart of galactic civilization, and somehow she was part of it. "The Drakari are natural warriors," Brooks continued, 7 feet tall, scales that can stop most weapons, strength that would make our strongest athletes look like children. "The Kreks have reflexes so fast they can dodge laser fire, and their exoskeletons are basically natural armor." "Then why are we here?" Katie asked. Brooks was quiet for a moment. "Because sometimes being the underdog teaches you things that natural advantages can't. Come on, let me show you to your quarters." Her room was small but comfortable, with a bed, desk, and storage area. The walls displayed a view of Earth that made her heart ache with homesickness. Brooks handed her a tablet with her class schedule and academy rules. "Orientation starts in 2 hours," he said. "You'll be assigned to Epsilon Squadron. Fair warning. Their current leader is Zex Thalarin, the Academy champion. He's Drakari, and he's never lost a match." After Brooks left, Katie sat on her bed and reviewed her schedule. Combat training, tactical analysis, weapon systems, physical conditioning. The classes looked challenging enough, but it was the names of her instructors that made her nervous. Most weren't even pronounceable by human vocal cords. She unpacked her few belongings, including a photo of her family back on Earth. Her parents had been proud but worried when she received her acceptance letter. Her little brother had made her promise to beat up some aliens for Earth. The memory made her smile despite her nerves. A chime from her tablet announced that orientation was beginning. Katie took a deep breath, straightened her uniform, and headed for the assembly hall. The hall was enormous, with seating arranged in tiers that rose toward the ceiling. Katie found the section marked for new students and took a seat near the back. Around her, beings from across the galaxy filled the seats. She felt incredibly small and very alone. A tall, elegant alien with silver skin and eyes like black diamonds stepped to the center of the hall. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly to every corner without amplification. Welcome, new students, to the Galactic Combat Institute. I am Instructor Vega. For the next 4 years, this academy will test every limit you thought you had and push you beyond them. Vega's gaze swept across the assembled students. You come from worlds where your species are the apex predators, the strongest, the fastest, the most intelligent. Here you are merely students. Your natural gifts mean nothing without discipline, strategy, and the will to improve. Katie felt the weight of stares from other students. Word had clearly spread that there was a human among them. She kept her eyes forward, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Combat is not about being the strongest, Vega continued. It is about being the most adaptable. The warrior who can change their approach, who can learn from defeat, who can find victory where others see only failure. That warrior will survive when the strong fall. The presentation continued with details about the Academy's ranking system, training schedules, and expectations. Katie learned that students advanced through combat trials, with regular matches that determined class standing. The top students in each year received advanced training and better assignments upon graduation. When orientation ended, students began filing out in groups organized by species. Katie noticed how naturally they clustered together, Drakari with Drakari, Krex with Krex. She stood alone until another human approached her. You must be the new arrival, the young man said. I'm Marcus Chen, second year. Want me to show you to the training halls? Katie nodded gratefully. Marcus seemed friendly enough, though she detected something in his manner that suggested caution rather than enthusiasm. As they walked, Marcus pointed out important locations, the medical bay, the dining facilities, the various training areas. Word of advice, he said quietly. Don't try to prove yourself too quickly. Most species here have been training for combat since they could walk. We humans need to be smart about how we approach things. What do you mean? Marcus stopped walking and looked around to make sure they weren't overheard. I mean, we're not built for this place, Katie. I've been here a year and I've learned that our strength is in support roles. Tactics, strategy, analysis. Let the natural warriors handle the fighting. Katie felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. Is that what all the humans here think? It's what the successful ones think, Marcus replied. Trust me, you don't want to end up like Peterson. What happened to Peterson? Marcus's expression darkened. He thought he could take on a Drakari in single combat during his first month. Spent 3 weeks in the medical bay, and when he got out, he transferred to the engineering track. They reached the training halls, where Katie could hear the sounds of combat practice echoing from multiple rooms. Through one doorway she glimpsed a match between two beings she couldn't identify, moving so fast they were almost blurs. The key to surviving here, Marcus said, is knowing your place. Humans aren't warriors, Katie, we're thinkers. The sooner you accept that, the easier things will be. Katie nodded, but something inside her rebelled against his words. She had not traveled across the galaxy to accept limitations. She had come here to prove that humans belonged among the stars, not to hide in support roles while others fought. As Marcus led her back to the dormitory levels, Katie made a silent promise to herself. She would find her place at this academy, but it would be on her own terms. The galaxy was about to learn what humans were really capable of, whether they were ready for that lesson or not. Katie's first week at the academy was worse than her worst nightmares. Every morning brought new evidence of just how outclassed she was by her alien classmates. The wake-up alarm sounded at 500 station time, and by 0530, Epsilon Squadron was expected to be in the main training hall for physical conditioning. The training hall was a massive space with equipment designed for beings whose bodies worked in completely different ways. Weight machines that started at loads that would challenge Earth's strongest powerlifters were considered beginner settings for most species here. Running tracks curved up walls and across ceilings to accommodate beings who could fly or climb. Katie stood in line with her squadron mates, all of whom towered over her 5'4" frame. To her left was Krix 4, a Krex whose mantis-like head swiveled to watch her with multifaceted eyes. His forearms ended in sharp points that could punch through steel plating. To her right stood Vera 9, a Vorthon whose crystalline body caught and reflected the hall's lights in patterns that hurt Katie's eyes to look at directly. At the front of the group was Zex the Lauren, the squadron leader and academy champion, even among the Drakari who averaged 7 feet in height. Zex was impressive. His scales had a deep green tint that spoke of noble bloodlines, and his movements carried the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "Today we test basic physical capabilities," announced their instructor, a being called Coach Thyman, whose species Katie hadn't learned yet. Thyman looked like a cross between a bear and a lizard, with thick fur covering scales and claws that clicked against the floor when he walked. The first test was lifting strength. Katie watched as Crix 4 approached a machine that measured grip and lifting force. The Crex wrapped his 4 hands around the testing bars and pulled. The readout climbed steadily. 2,000 pounds, 3,000, 4,000. When Crix 4 finished, the machine showed 6,847 pounds of lifting force. He had barely seemed to strain. Vera 9's turn came next. The Vorthon's approach was different. Instead of gripping the bars with hands, she used her ability to manipulate gravity fields. The machine registered forces that made Crix 4's numbers look small. When she finished, other students were nodding with approval. Then it was Katie's turn. She approached the machine knowing what was coming but hoping against hope that somehow her training on Earth had prepared her for this moment. She gripped the bars, planted her feet, and pulled with everything she had. The readout climbed slowly. 100 pounds, 150, 200. Katie's muscles burned as she pushed harder. 250, 275, 300. Her vision started to blur from the effort. Finally, at 312 pounds, she had to let go. Her best effort wouldn't have been enough to lift Crix 4's rifle, let alone the alien himself. The silence that followed was worse than laughter would have been. Her squadron mates didn't mock her. They simply looked away, as if witnessing something embarrassing that everyone would pretend hadn't happened. Coach Thyman marked her score on his tablet without comment and called for the next test. Speed trials were next. The running course was a 3-dimensional maze that used artificial gravity to create paths along walls and ceilings. Katie watched as her classmates navigated the course with abilities that seemed like magic to her. Zex simply powered through obstacles with raw strength and speed, his heavy footsteps echoing through the hall. An Etherian student named Swift Wind practically flew through the course, her gossamer wings catching air currents that Katie couldn't even feel. When Katie's turn came, she managed the basic ground-level portions of the course reasonably well. Her time wouldn't have been embarrassing at a human military academy. Here it was dead last by a margin that made Coach Thyman check his timer twice to make sure it was working correctly. The pattern continued through every test: reflexes, endurance, combat simulation. In each category, Katie performed at levels that would have been respectable for a human, but were pathetic compared to beings who had evolved for war. The worst moment came during a simple combat drill. Students were paired off to practice basic defensive techniques. Katie found herself facing Elena Vasquez, the only other human in their squadron. Elena had been at the academy for 6 months and had clearly adapted to the reality of their situation. "Just try to block my attacks," Elena said quietly. "Don't worry about offense. That's not what we're here for." Katie wanted to argue, but she could see the wisdom in Elena's approach. Elena had survived this long by understanding her limitations. Katie fell into a defensive stance and prepared for the exercise. Elena's attacks were careful and controlled, designed to let Katie practice blocking techniques without getting hurt. Even so, Katie struggled to keep up. Elena was faster and stronger than her despite being human. The months of academy training had clearly improved her capabilities significantly. After the drill ended, Elena offered some advice. "You're trying too hard," she said. "I made the same mistake when I first arrived. This place will break you if you try to compete directly with aliens who are just built better than us." "Then what's the point of being here?" Katie asked. Elena glanced around to make sure they weren't being overheard. "We're here to learn, not to compete. Watch how the different species fight. Study their techniques, understand their strategies. That knowledge is valuable, even if we can't match their physical abilities." Katie nodded, but inside she felt a growing frustration. She hadn't come here to be a scholar of alien combat techniques. She had come here to prove that humans belonged among the galaxy's warriors. The breaking point came 3 weeks into her training. Epsilon Squadron was assigned a group combat exercise designed to test teamwork and tactical thinking. The scenario was simple. Their squad would defend a position against an attacking force led by Zex himself. Katie had spent hours studying the exercise parameters and had developed what she thought was a clever strategy. Instead of meeting Zex's attack head-on, she proposed that they use the terrain to their advantage. The training ground included several levels and multiple approach routes. If they could force Zex's team to split their attack, they might be able to defeat smaller groups individually. Marcus Chen, who had been assigned as second-in-command for the exercise, listened to Katie's proposal with growing skepticism. "That's too complicated," he said finally. "We stick to standard defensive formations, set up overlapping fields of fire and make them come to us." "But that plays directly into their strengths," Katie argued. "Zex's team has 3 Drakari and 2 Kreks. In a straight fight we'll lose in minutes." "We're going to lose anyway," Elena said quietly. "The goal is to last as long as possible and learn from the experience." Katie wanted to argue further, but Marcus had already begun positioning the squad according to traditional defensive doctrine. She took her assigned position and tried to push down her frustration. The exercise began with Zex's team advancing across open ground toward their defensive position. Just as Katie had predicted, the aliens made no attempt at subtlety. They simply charged forward, relying on their superior physical abilities to overwhelm the defenders. Marcus's defensive formation held for exactly 93 seconds. Zex himself led the assault, his scaled hide shrugging off the training weapon's stun blasts as if they were raindrops. The Kreks members of his team moved with blinding speed, flanking the defensive position before the defenders could adjust. Katie found herself face to face with Zex as he broke through their lines. She raised her training rifle and fired 3 quick shots at center mass. The stun blast struck his chest and dissipated harmlessly against his natural armor. Zex didn't even slow down. His response was gentle by Drakari standards, a palm strike to her chest that sent her flying backward to land hard on the training mat. Her rifle went spinning away and the breath was knocked completely out of her lungs. By the time she could breathe again, the exercise was over. Zex approached her as she struggled to sit up. His expression wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. "You have courage, little human, but courage without capability is just foolishness. Perhaps you should consider the engineering track. Not everyone is built for combat." His words were delivered without malice, which somehow made them hurt worse than any insult would have. He was simply stating what he saw as an obvious fact. Humans weren't warriors. They were support staff in a galaxy where real fighting was done by beings with natural advantages. After the exercise, Katie sat alone in her quarters, staring at the photo of her family. Her little brother's face grinned back at her, full of confidence that his big sister would show those aliens what humans could do. She felt like she was failing not just herself, but everyone on Earth who was counting on her to prove their worth. A soft knock on her door interrupted her brooding. She opened it to find Marcus standing in the hallway looking uncomfortable. "Look, Katie," he said. "I know today was rough, but you need to understand something. I've been here a year and I've seen what happens to humans who don't accept reality. They get hurt badly. Some of them never recover." Katie stepped aside to let him into her room. Marcus sat down across from her desk and continued talking. "There's no shame in recognizing our limitations. Humans have contributed to galactic civilization in dozens of ways that don't involve combat. Scientists, diplomats, engineers." Katie began her transformation at 0400 each morning, an hour before the Academy's official wake-up call. While her squadron mates slept, she made her way to the combat archives, a vast digital library containing recordings of every major battle, training exercise, and combat demonstration in galactic history. The archive terminals were designed for various alien physiologies, but Katie had learned to adapt the human-compatible stations to her needs. She started with basic searches: Drakari combat techniques, Kreks fighting patterns, Vorthan tactical approaches. What she found changed everything. Each species fought according to their evolutionary advantages, but evolution was also a limitation. The Drakari had developed as apex predators on a world with large, dangerous prey. Their combat style reflected this: direct attacks, overwhelming force, a preference for frontal assault. It was devastatingly effective, but it was also predictable. The Kreks came from a world of pack hunters. Their speed and coordination were unmatched, but they relied on specific movement patterns that had been hardwired into their nervous systems over millions of years. Once Katie understood those patterns, she could predict where a Kreks would move before they made the decision themselves. Night after night, she studied footage of Academy matches, galactic military conflicts, and historical battles. She took notes on everything: which species favored their left or right sides, how long different aliens could maintain peak performance before fatigue set in, what environmental factors affected their abilities. But studying wasn't enough. Katie needed to test her theories, and the only way to do that was in actual combat. The problem was finding opponents willing to face a human who had already been written off as unsuitable for serious fighting. The opportunity came from an unexpected source. Lisa Wong, a third-year human student, had been dominating the informal training sessions that humans held among themselves. Lisa was good, probably the best human fighter at the academy, but she fought using traditional Earth martial arts adapted for the academy's training weapons. Katie approached Lisa after one of these sessions, where Lisa had easily defeated 2 other human students in succession. "I'd like to challenge you to a practice match," Katie said. Lisa looked surprised. Katie was known as the human who couldn't even beat the basic training scenarios. "Are you sure? I don't want to hurt your confidence any more than it already has been." "I'm sure," Katie replied, "but I'd like to make it interesting. Let's use the full combat simulation chamber, not just the basic training mats." The combat simulation chamber could create virtually any environment, and was normally reserved for advanced students. Lisa's curiosity was clearly piqued. "All right, but I choose the scenario." Lisa selected a straightforward arena setting, a circular chamber with basic obstacles but no environmental hazards. It was designed to test pure fighting skill without complications. Perfect for Katie's purposes. The match began with Lisa doing exactly what Katie expected. She closed distance quickly and attacked with a combination of strikes that would have overwhelmed any normal human opponent. Lisa was fast, skilled, and confident in her abilities. Katie responded with something Lisa had never seen before. Instead of trying to match Lisa's speed or counter her attacks directly, Katie moved in ways that didn't make sense according to any martial arts tradition. She borrowed a footwork pattern she had seen in Etherian flight techniques, combined it with a defensive posture from Drakari wrestling, and added timing elements she had learned from watching Krex Pack hunting videos. The result was a fighting style that was completely unpredictable because it had never existed before. Lisa found herself unable to anticipate Katie's movements because they didn't follow any pattern she recognized. When Lisa committed to an attack, Katie was already somewhere else. When Lisa tried to create distance, Katie closed in using angles that shouldn't have been possible. The match ended when Katie used a technique she had developed specifically for this fight. As Lisa launched what should have been a finishing combination, Katie stepped forward instead of back, got inside Lisa's guard, and applied a joint lock that combined human biomechanics with leverage principles she had learned from studying Vorthan gravity manipulation. Lisa found herself on the ground, unable to continue, while Katie stood over her breathing hard but victorious. The few human students who had gathered to watch the match stood in stunned silence. "How did you do that?" Lisa asked as Katie helped her to her feet. "I stopped trying to fight like a human," Katie replied. "I started fighting like someone who had studied every other species in the galaxy." Word of Katie's victory spread quickly through the human community at the academy. Some dismissed it as a fluke, but others began to pay attention. More importantly, her win earned her an audience with Instructor Vega, who had been monitoring all student activities through the Academy's extensive sensor network. Vega's office was unlike anywhere else Katie had been on the station. The walls displayed scenes from the instructor's homeworld, a place of crystalline mountains and silver seas under a purple sky. Vega herself was even more imposing up close, her silver skin seeming to glow with its own inner light. "Sit," Vega commanded, gesturing to a chair that adjusted itself to human proportions. "I watched your match with the Wong human. Interesting technique." Katie waited for the instructor to continue. She had learned that most alien species preferred to control the pace of conversations. "You fought in a way I have never seen before," Vega continued. "Not human, not any other known species. Something new." "I studied combat footage from the archives," Katie said. "I tried to learn from everyone." Vega's black eyes studied Katie for a long moment. Most students rely on their species' natural advantages. They perfect what evolution gave them. You have taken a different approach. I don't have natural advantages to rely on. Perhaps that is an advantage in itself. Vega stood and moved to one of her displays, which now showed footage from Katie's match with Lisa. My species, the Nethys, were once like yours, considered weak by galactic standards. We were small, soft, with no natural weapons or armor. When we first encountered the greater galaxy, we were dismissed as unfit for anything but scholarly pursuits. Katie leaned forward, interested. She had never heard this story before. But the Nethys survived when species with every natural advantage fell to more aggressive neighbors. Do you know why? Because you adapted? Because we refused to accept that our disadvantages were permanent. Vega turned back to Katie. Every species in this galaxy is locked into patterns created by millions of years of evolution. They cannot change what they are, but humans have something different. You change yourselves to meet challenges instead of relying on what nature provided. Vega returned to her desk and activated a holographic display. I am assigning you additional training time in the advanced combat chambers. You will have access to every scenario in our database, and you will face opponents that will push your new techniques to their limits. Thank you, instructor. Do not thank me yet. This training will be harder than anything you have experienced. You will face simulated opponents based on the galaxy's greatest warriors. You will lose more often than you win, at least at first. The question is whether you have the determination to continue when defeat seems inevitable. Katie thought about Marcus's advice to accept her limitations, about Elena's strategy of avoiding direct confrontation, about Zex's casual dismissal of human combat potential. I'll continue. The advanced training began immediately. Katie found herself facing holographic opponents that represented the best fighters from dozens of species. The AI that controlled them had access to thousands of years of combat data, and it created challenges that would have been impossible in real life. She fought a simulated Drakari champion from the Hegemony Wars, whose strength could shatter the training chamber's reinforced walls. She faced a Krex hunting pack that moved with perfect coordination and reflexes fast enough to dodge energy weapons. She battled Vorthan warriors who could manipulate gravity to make her feel like she weighed 1,000 pounds or was floating weightless. Each defeat taught her something new. The Drakari champion's strength was devastating, but he telegraphed his major attacks by shifting his weight in specific ways. The Krex pack was incredibly fast, but they followed hunting patterns that could be disrupted if you knew where to strike. The Vorthan gravity warriors were powerful, but their abilities required concentration that could be broken by unexpected attacks. Slowly, Katie began to win matches. Not through superior strength or speed, but through techniques that no one had ever seen before because no one had ever needed to develop them. She learned to fight opponents who were stronger by using their strength against them. She defeated faster enemies by being in places they didn't expect her to be. She overcame abilities that seemed supernatural by understanding their limitations. The breakthrough came when she faced a simulation based on Zex the Lauren himself. The AI had access to recordings of every match Zex had ever fought, and it recreated his fighting style with perfect accuracy. Katie had requested this specific opponent after weeks of preparation. The simulated Zex was everything the real one was. Katie's first official challenge came against Blix 7, a Krex warrior ranked 830th in the Academy standings. To most observers, it seemed like a reasonable match. Two bottom-tier students fighting for a marginal improvement in position. No one expected it to be interesting. The combat arena was packed despite the low stakes. Word had spread about Katie's unusual training methods and her victory over Lisa Wong. Students from dozens of species filled the viewing areas, curious to see if the human could apply her unorthodox techniques against a real alien opponent. Blix 7 was a typical Krex, 6 feet tall with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp points that could punch through armor plating. His compound eyes tracked Katie's movements as she entered the arena, and his mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or anticipation. The little soft-skinned thinks she can face a true warrior. Blix 7 chittered to his friends in the viewing area. I will be gentle when I defeat her. Katie ignored the commentary and focused on what she knew about Krex fighting patterns. They relied on speed and coordination. using all four arms in complex attack sequences that could overwhelm most opponents. But like all evolved fighting styles, theirs followed predictable patterns based on their hunting instincts. The match began with Blix 7 doing exactly what Katie expected. He closed distance rapidly, his forearms weaving a web of strikes that would have shredded any normal opponent. His movements were blinding fast, each attack flowing into the next with mechanical precision. Katie responded with something Blix 7 had never encountered. Instead of trying to block or dodge his attacks directly, she moved in patterns that disrupted his rhythm. When he expected her to move left, she shifted right but at an angle that put her inside his attack pattern. When he committed to a forearm combination, she was suddenly beneath his strikes, attacking weak points he didn't know he had. The Krex fighting style was designed for prey that would try to escape or opponents who would meet force with force. It had no response for someone who moved like water, flowing around attacks and striking from unexpected angles. Katie used techniques she had borrowed from 3 different species, combined in ways that created openings in Blix 7's defenses. The end came when Blix 7 attempted his finishing move, a devastating forearm strike that could shatter stone. Katie stepped forward instead of back, got inside his reach, and applied a joint lock that combined human anatomy knowledge with leverage principles from Vorthan gravity manipulation. Blix 7 found himself on the ground, unable to move, while Katie maintained control with minimal effort. The arena fell silent for a moment before erupting in surprised chatter. A human had just defeated a Krex warrior using techniques that shouldn't have existed. Katie helped Blix 7 to his feet, noting his mixture of confusion and respect. "How did you do that?" he clicked. "I have never seen such fighting before." "I studied your people's combat methods," Katie replied, "and I found ways to work around them." The victory moved Katie from 847th place to 830th, a minor improvement in numerical terms, but a major psychological victory. More importantly, it proved that her simulation training could translate to real combat. Word spread quickly through the academy. Within days, Katie found herself the subject of intense scrutiny from students and instructors alike. Some dismissed her victory as luck, but others began studying her methods with professional interest. Her next challenge came 2 weeks later against Thex Prime, a Vorthan warrior ranked 785th. The Vorthans were considered one of the most dangerous species in combat due to their ability to manipulate gravity fields. Thex Prime could make Katie feel like she weighed 1,000 pounds or send her floating helplessly through the air. The match drew an even larger crowd than the first. Katie had become something of a curiosity, the human who fought like no one else. Students who had never paid attention to human activities now watched her training sessions and debated her techniques. Thex Prime's crystalline body reflected the arena, lights and patterns that hurt to look at directly. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in Katie's bones. "I have studied your previous match, human. Your tricks will not work against Vorthan combat techniques." Katie had expected this. Each victory would be harder than the last as opponents learned from her previous fights. But she had been studying too, developing new approaches and refining her understanding of alien combat psychology. The match began with Thex Prime attempting to end things quickly. He created a gravity field that should have driven Katie to her knees, making her too heavy to move effectively. It was a standard Vorthan opening: immobilize the opponent, then finish them with conventional attacks. Katie had prepared for this exact scenario. Instead of fighting the gravity field directly, she used it. The increased weight gave her movements more momentum, and she had practiced fighting under heavy gravity in the advanced training chambers. She moved like someone underwater, but she moved with purpose. Thex Prime was unprepared for an opponent who could function under his gravity manipulation. His follow-up attacks were based on the assumption that Katie would be helpless. Instead, she used the gravity field's edges to her advantage, moving in and out of the effect zone in ways that disrupted his control. The Vorthan combat style relied on maintaining distance while using gravity manipulation to control the battlefield. Katie denied him both advantages. She stayed close where his gravity fields affected him as much as her, and used unpredictable movement patterns that made it impossible for him to establish proper control. The victory came when Katie managed to disrupt Thex Prime's concentration during a complex gravity manipulation. Without his focus, the fields collapsed, and Katie was able to apply a submission hold that left him unable to continue. Another impossible victory. Another step up the rankings. Katie was now ranked 785th, and people were starting to take notice. Her third challenge was against Nyx Alpha, an Etherian ranked 720th. The Etherians were graceful flyers with hollow bones and gossamer wings. They fought using three-dimensional tactics that took advantage of their ability to control aerial space. This match was different from the others. Nyx Alpha had studied Katie's previous fights and had developed counter-strategies based on her observed techniques. The Etherian used her flight advantage to stay out of Katie's reach, forcing the human to fight at a disadvantage. For the first time since beginning her climb through the rankings, Katie found herself in serious trouble. Nyx Alpha's aerial attacks came from angles that were almost impossible to defend against, and her speed in the air was far beyond anything Katie could match on the ground. But Katie had learned something important during her months of study. Every advantage came with a corresponding weakness. The Etherians' ability to fly made them devastating opponents in open spaces, but it also made them dependent on air currents and vulnerable in confined areas. Katie began using the arena's architecture against her opponent. She forced the fight into corners and against walls where Nyx Alpha's flight advantage became a liability. She used obstacles to break up the Etherians' attack patterns and created situations where superior mobility worked against her opponent. The victory was narrow and hard-fought, but it proved something important. Katie's methods could adapt to counter-strategies. She wasn't just using fixed techniques. She was thinking and improvising in real time. Word of her victories reached the Academy's senior instructors. Katie found herself called to meetings with beings she had only seen from a distance. They questioned her methods, analyzed her techniques, and debated what her success might mean for combat theory in general. More importantly, her victories caught the attention of Zex the Lauren himself. The Academy champion began attending her matches, studying her techniques with the focused attention of a professional warrior. Katie could feel his eyes on her during training sessions, and she knew he was beginning to take her seriously as a potential threat. The monthly ranking matches arrived again, and Katie faced a decision. She was now ranked 720th, high enough to challenge students in the middle tiers. The safe move would be to continue her gradual climb, building experience and reputation through careful progression. Instead, Katie submitted a challenge that shocked the entire Academy. She challenged Marcus Chen for his position at 4th place. Marcus was the highest-ranked human at the Academy, a position he had earned through careful application of tactical thinking and support abilities. He was respected by aliens and humans alike for his strategic mind and his acceptance of humanity's proper role in galactic civilization. "Katie, what are you doing?" Marcus asked when he received the challenge notification. "You're not ready for this level. I've been training here for a year longer than you." "I'm not trying to embarrass you," Katie replied, "but I need to prove something both to myself and to everyone watching." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "You really think you can beat me?" "I think I can beat anyone if I understand their fighting style well enough." The challenge was scheduled for the following week, giving both fighters time to prepare. Katie spent the time studying Marcus's previous matches and developing strategies specifically designed to counter his approach. Marcus fought like a human who had learned to survive in an alien environment. The news of Katie's challenge spread through Nexus Prime like wildfire. Within hours, every being on the station knew that a human had challenged the Academy's undefeated champion for the top position. Betting pools opened across dozens of species, with odds so heavily favored towards Zex that most bookmakers stopped taking bets entirely. The month leading up to the match was unlike anything in the Academy's history. Students who had never shown interest in human activities suddenly wanted to watch Katie's training sessions. Alien media representatives requested interviews, and diplomatic observers from multiple worlds announced their intention to attend the fight. Katie ignored the attention and focused on preparation. She spent every available hour in the advanced training chambers, facing simulated opponents based on Zex's fighting style. She studied every match he had ever fought, analyzed his movement patterns frame by frame, and identified weaknesses that existed only in theory. The problem was that Zex's weaknesses were barely noticeable even when you knew what to look for. He favored his left side by perhaps 2%. his reaction time slowed by microseconds after extended combat. His natural armor had tiny gaps between scales that could theoretically be exploited. These weren't the kind of obvious flaws that could be easily used in battle. Instructor Vega provided additional training time and access to classified combat archives. "You have accomplished something remarkable," she told Katie during one session. "But Zex Thalarin is not like the opponents you have faced before. He is a generational talent even among the Drakari." "Every warrior can be defeated," Katie replied. "I just need to find the right approach." "Perhaps. But consider this, what happens if you lose? Your accomplishments have already changed how the galaxy views human combat potential. A loss to Zex would not diminish what you have achieved." Katie understood what Vega was offering, a graceful way to withdraw from a challenge that seemed impossible to win. The logical choice would be to accept that she had proven her point and avoid a defeat that might undermine everything she had accomplished. "I appreciate the advice," Katie said, "but I didn't come this far to stop before the real test." The other humans at the academy were divided about the challenge. Marcus supported her publicly but privately expressed doubts about her chances. Elena thought the challenge was reckless and potentially damaging to human reputation if Katie lost badly. Captain Brooks offered tactical advice while making it clear he thought she was making a mistake. Only Lisa Wong seemed to understand Katie's decision. "You have to fight him," she said during one of their training sessions. "Not because you're guaranteed to win, but because someone has to prove it's possible." The day of the match arrived with ceremony usually reserved for major galactic events. The Academy's largest arena was reconfigured to accommodate representatives from dozens of worlds. Video feeds would carry the match to every corner of the galaxy, making it the most watched single combat in history. Katie spent the morning in meditation, using techniques she had learned from studying various alien mental disciplines. She needed to be calm, focused, and ready to implement strategies that existed only in her mind. No human had ever attempted what she was planning to do. As she prepared to leave for the arena, Katie received an unexpected visitor. Zex Thalarin stood in her doorway, having to duck to fit through the human-sized entrance to her quarters. "I wanted to speak with you before our match," he said. "May I enter?" Katie stepped aside, curious about what the champion might want to discuss. Zex looked around her small quarters, his attention focusing on the photo of her family that still sat on her desk. "Your breeding group?" he asked, using the Drakari term for family. "My parents and younger brother," Katie confirmed. Zex nodded approvingly. "They must be proud of what you have accomplished here. Regardless of today's outcome, you have brought honor to your species." "Thank you. But the outcome isn't determined yet." Zex studied her for a moment. "You truly believe you can defeat me?" "I believe I understand your fighting style well enough to find openings," Katie replied. "Whether I can exploit those openings quickly enough remains to be seen." "I have studied your matches as well," Zex said. "Your techniques are unlike anything I have encountered. You fight like someone who has learned from every species in the galaxy." "That's exactly what I did." Zex was quiet for a moment. "I want you to know that I respect what you have accomplished. But when we fight, I will show no mercy. To do otherwise would dishonor both of us. I understand, and I want you to know that I plan to defeat you." Zex's expression might have been a smile, though it was hard to tell with Drakari facial features. "Good. A worthy opponent should be confident. I will see you in the arena, Katie Morrison." The arena was packed beyond capacity when Katie arrived. Beings from dozens of species filled every available space, and the noise was overwhelming. She had never seen so many different types of alien in one place, all focused on watching a single human attempt the impossible. The pre-match ceremonies seemed to last forever. Academy officials spoke about the historic nature of the event, and representatives from various worlds offered formal greetings. Katie barely heard any of it, focused instead on the mental preparations that would determine her performance. Finally, the introductions began. Fighting for the challenger position, representing the planet Earth and the human species, ranked 4th in the Academy standings, Katie Morrison. The crowd's response was mixed. Cheers from humans and supporters, polite applause from most aliens, and skeptical silence from others. Katie walked to the center of the arena, feeling the weight of every gaze upon her. Fighting for the champion position, representing the Drakari hegemony, undefeated in 47 Academy matches, Zex Thalarin. The crowd's response was immediate and overwhelming. Zex was a known quantity, a proven warrior whose victories had been decisive and spectacular. He walked to the arena center with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. The two fighters faced each other as the referee explained the rules. Standard Academy combat protocols. Match continues until one fighter yields, is unable to continue, or the referee declares a decisive victory. Katie looked up at Zex, who towered over her by more than 2 feet, and felt the enormity of what she was attempting. "Fighters ready?" the referee asked. Both Katie and Zex nodded. "Begin." Zex's opening attack was everything Katie had expected and worse. He moved with speed that seemed impossible for something his size, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. His first strike would have shattered concrete, and it was aimed directly at Katie's center mass. Katie was already moving before the attack began. She had studied this exact opening sequence hundreds of times, and she knew Zex would follow it with a specific combination of follow-up strikes. Instead of trying to block or deflect his attack, she moved to a position where his own momentum would carry him past her. The crowd gasped as Zex's devastating strike hit empty air. Katie was suddenly behind him, striking at pressure points she had identified through careful study of Drakari anatomy. Her attacks wouldn't have hurt a human, but they disrupted nerve clusters that even Drakari armor couldn't protect. Zex spun to face her, his expression showing surprise for the first time in years. "Interesting opening, little human." Katie didn't respond verbally. She was too busy implementing the most complex fighting strategy she had ever attempted. Every movement was calculated to disrupt Zex's rhythm, force him to react instead of attacking, and gradually create the opening she needed. The match settled into a pattern unlike anything the crowd had ever seen. Zex would launch devastating attacks that should have ended the fight instantly, but Katie was never where those attacks landed. She moved like water, flowing around his strikes and responding with techniques that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. For 10 minutes, Katie managed to stay ahead of Zex's assault through pure technique and preparation, but she could feel her energy beginning to fade while Zex seemed barely warmed up. She needed to change the dynamic of the fight or she would eventually be worn down. The opportunity came when Zex attempted his signature combination, a series of strikes that had never been successfully defended against. Katie had studied this sequence more than any other, and she had developed a response that existed nowhere in galactic combat theory. Instead of defending against the combination, Katie attacked into it. She moved forward as Zex began his sequence, getting inside his guard at the moment when his own attacks committed him to specific movements. She used techniques borrowed from 4 different species, applied in ways that created openings in what should have been an unbreakable assault. The crowd fell silent as Katie's counterattack landed. Her strikes hit the exact pressure points she had identified during months of study, targeting the old injury she had noticed in his left side. For the first time in his career, Zex's legendary strength faltered. But Zex was a champion for good reason. Even injured and off balance, he adapted quickly. His next attack was pure desperation, a wild, powerful strike that abandoned technique in favor of raw force. It should have been easy to avoid, but Katie was tired, and her reflexes were a fraction of a second too slow. The strike caught her in the ribs,